Hey, this video is for my mountain home folks, or those that would like to be mountain home folks, all about what to expect and what to inspect when you're looking at properties in the mountains, things that you might not be familiar with, like well, septic, different heating sources, propanes, boilers, all that good stuff. So I'm actually going to bring in my mountain home inspector, Josh, and he's going to give you a whole bunch of insight and tips and things to be aware of before you make that purchase. So if you're into that and you want to learn all about it, stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Sean Murphy, team leader of the Moxie Denver team, a real estate team here in the Mile High City, and we cover the greater Denver metro area and the mountains, the foothills. Today, I have special guest, Josh Seidler with National Property Inspections. He is my go-to mountain home inspector, and I brought him in just to give you guys all the deets that you need to know about when you're even looking at and inspecting a mountain property up here in the foothills. It is a national, RADON Awareness Month. If you're not familiar with RADON.
Yeah, it's one of the daughter products of the nuclear breakdown of uranium. And so it's a carcinogen, it's the #2 cause of lung cancer. And it's a concern when you're buying a house because you don't know the conditions in that house and you want to know what the radon levels are so you can mitigate your risk. There's actually licensing requirements in Colorado to be able to test now. So I am fully licensed, insured, certified, and there's more strict requirements now even than other states have. I generally now test for 3 days.
And it just collects air samples and then you get a reading.
Our EPA has set the action level at 4 picocuries per liter or more. The thing about mountain properties especially is sometimes we have that uranium real close to the surface up here. We see some of the highest levels in mountain properties.
Nothing to freak out about if you do have high readings, because it's a really easy system to install in the property.
A real simple process actually. Radon enters houses because homes typically have a lower atmospheric pressure than the soil underneath them. The systems that mitigate the radon just change that pressure differential, and so what that does is it just prevents the radon from coming in the house, and it usually drops the levels immediately.
And radon is one of those items that you'll get a standard home inspection. They'll check all the outlets, all the faucets, all the crawl spaces, things like that. Radon would be a la carte extra items that you could get added on, and I always recommend them. Just a health and safety thing, and it's not too expensive of a thing to mitigate. Cool, and let's just talk about the types of homes. A lot of homes up in the mountains, they're built to fit into the terrain around them, so you get a lot of custom home builds and a lot of add-ons. Anything to be aware of when you're looking at homes that you could tell are just super custom?
It makes it challenging from an inspection standpoint or from maintenance and repairs. When you have a custom home, sometimes things aren't done exactly the same. I see log posts in crawl space, literal tree trunk logs with bark on them still.
They have those here.
Those work fine. You're not going to find any engineering charts that tell you what the load rating for that is, so we're just kind of going off of experience on some of that kind of stuff to know if it's in good shape. And then you add things onto the old homes, a new bathroom, a second, third, fourth bedroom, whatever it might be. Then we want to make sure that the flashing on the roof is done correctly so you don't leak in between the addition. You want to make sure the new house is going to move at the same rate as the old house. Make sure the heating system's been tied in properly. All these things are totally different from most standard homes. Plan some extra time probably to be able to check those things out.
And that is why I lean on Josh for my mountain home inspections. Not only is he's great at he's seen a lot of things, but he also can help you understand okay, this is a serious issue, and this is just some piece of living in the mountains and a piece of owning this type of property. Nothing to raise alarm about. How about some weather related issues?
We have a couple things going against us in a way from a weather standpoint that we've got to account for when we build houses and when we live in them. So we've got elevation, and then we've got just kind of slopes of the house. Some houses literally just sit in the shadow of a mountain, or there's huge trees around that shade the house throughout the day. Elevation just makes things colder. There's some of the higher elevation areas in the mountains, you'll have snow on the roof year round. Some houses have a problem with ice dams, which is when the ice melts, refreezes, and it can block gutters. It can intrude underneath improperly insulated, improperly ventilated roofs to where you'll get water intrusion inside the house. We have to pay attention to that with different houses on the shady side of a mountain, or even just the shady side of the house. And other houses that sit in the sun, the UV exposure is greater up here. That just deteriorates siding, trim, caulking. There's different maintenance requirements for houses that just get beat by the sun, and even like the side of the house that gets beat by the sun.
And you'll see that, homeowners will have zigzag up and down on the eaves to melt that snow so it doesn't dam back up, lining the gutters so all that ice doesn't just rip off the gutters, right?
Yeah,
so
heat cables.
Let's talk about decks and replacing maintenance. What are some of the common things that you see with decks and things to be aware of?
We love wood decks, right? Because it's beautiful and generally pretty nice to walk on, but the problem with wood decks is they're flat wood surfaces that just sit out in the weather. And so in the winter, snow sits on them and soaks in. Even later that day in Colorado, right? It gets sunny, it'll melt that off, and then it just sucks all the moisture out of that wood, and we see a lot of splitting and finish deterioration. So decks just take a beating. You can extend the life of your deck if you shovel it. And a lot of it has to do with the way decks are built. Composite decks are becoming more popular. They're more water resistant. But then if you haven't treated the joists underneath correctly, then we see rotting on the joists that can cause popped boards and loose rails and things like that.
Doesn't mean like the whole deck needs to be replaced. Kind of like interchangeable parts, like repair the stuff that's deteriorating faster than others.
You definitely want to stay on top of those repairs to avoid a full deck replacement, because those aren't cheap.
Yeah. How about elevation and slope?
Super rare actually to find a mountain house that's on flat lot. Up here we've got crushed granite, so it's real loose and it tends to be susceptible to movement. When the water runs down the side of a mountain, it erodes that soil away. That's one issue. So if you don't have your deck footings and even your house footings and foundation properly done, you can have some undermining and washout around the foundation. So you got to watch for that. The key there is to get the water away from the house, and it's just an extra challenge on the side of a mountain because you have a whole mountain sometimes of snow melt coming towards your house, and there's ways to address it, but they're not always cheap. So we want to make sure we've got a plan in place to get that water diverted around your house and not damaging the foundation and structure.
Right, and that's, probably like the most important thing about a house, especially on this side of the hill, is the foundational stuff. Other things that can cause damage, let's talk about some wildlife. I'm talking about birds today, because you're mentioning wood siding.
Yeah, so the deal there is we have beautiful birds. There's some that like the warmth of your house and they want to get into your house. The way they do that is they drill in through the siding. When they do that, they create holes from the outside to the inside of your house, which, as you can imagine, is terrible for moisture to get in. Then if they're not using it, well, mice and squirrels, and they like to come in through those holes and get warm also. So then we've got rodent intrusion and squirrels and raccoons, and they just tear up your insulation and can damage your electrical system. So it's real important to keep that siding and trim intact.
Just keeping an eye on your deck and doing regular maintenance, just keeping an eye on the exterior, and when you see a hole, you got to plug it up, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Be on top of it.
Cool. All right. Water supply. A lot of folks are going to be on well and septic, and it's one of those items that are kind of a la carte on top of a general home inspection that I always recommend.
Yeah, the thing about the wells in the foothills, most of these homes are not on an aquifer. Just briefly, what an aquifer is kind of like a spongy body of water underneath like the Denver area. So it's fairly easy to drill down and get water out of those. But up here in the mountains, it's too far down. When you start at 7, 8, 9,000 feet of elevation, what you're doing to get water is trying to find underground hydraulic feature, right, that has water. So you drill down to it. What we're trying to do is get to those springs, essentially. So when you have a well up here, you're generally having spring water. So most of the time it tastes good. But what that also means is it may not be a consistent source of water. You want to make sure it's still producing water and that your well hasn't gone dry. And then because you're kind of pulling water semi from the surface, you want to make sure someone's septic isn't getting into your well. So you do a potability test to make sure your water's safe to drink. That's a big piece that is an important part of buying a house up here.
Right, and keeping your wellhead like free and clear of any debris too.
You want to have clearance so they're just sucking clean air in and not sucking soil and spider webs and all things that I look at with wellheads, just to make sure we've got a good intact well cap, not sucking contaminants into the water essentially. So we're testing for E. coli because that's fecal material that's immediately unsafe to drink. And then we also test for just general coliform bacteria, which is an indicator. So that tells us, hey, you might be getting some bacteria into your water. They're pretty quick. They generally take 2 to 3 business days to get results back.
You have to adapt with a different type of filtration system and knowing how much of that's getting into your water, so you know how often you have to be replacing your units. How about septic systems then?
They're great systems. One of the best filtration systems to clean water is the soil, because you filter water through it, clean water comes out the other side, and the wastes break down into fertilizer and things like that. The maintenance is just being careful what goes down the drains. General rule of thumb is to have your septic system pumped and inspected every 2 years.
And I know in like Jefferson County, one of the rules they have is a septic use permit in order to transfer ownership of the permit of the septic tank. I always say, like, take your shit when you go type thing. And so they'll pump the tank, and when they're pumping the tank, they'll inspect it to make sure the vault is good, no cracks or anything like that, and they'll issue the septic use permit. I don't think Park County, I don't think you guys have that same rule.
No, so, I wish it was a statewide. It's not. I think it should be done every real estate.
All right, let's take a break from the info and the knowledge that Josh is laying down for you. If you appreciate this type of video, do me a favor, do the YouTube thing for me and give this video a like. And if you haven't yet, make sure you hit subscribe and hit that bell, and so that you're notified each time that we put up an awesome video like this. All right, let's get back to it. Cool, all right, heating sources, because this is a hot topic. Because they all work, they're all gonna heat your house, but it's just like, some to me get points for style.
Right on. I always like to just kind of start with the oldest, most simple heating system, right, as a fireplace or a wood stove of some sort. Even houses with another heat source still have fireplaces because, number one, it's awesome to sit by a fire and read a book and have a drink and whatever. So you want to make sure your fireplace is in good shape, know how often you need to clean it. The National Fire Protection Association always recommends getting the fireplace and chimney professionally cleaned and inspected by a chimney sweep. So I'm not a chimney sweep. I always recommend that as part of buying a house up here. That kind of leads me into some houses have only electricity. A lot of people may not like that, but honestly, we're going towards electric. You can heat a house just fine with electric baseboard heat. Generally, those electric baseboard heaters are cheap to replace if they ever go out.
Do you typically see those really like higher elevation homes where they're not getting a gas line, or they're not getting access for like a propane truck to come fill it up is limited?
So probably somewhere that there isn't natural gas lines going to, and someone's just chosen not to have propane tank installed because it's just simpler to just have the electricity. It really depends on the area. It's not necessarily elevation based. It's just could be remote based, whatever availability there is.
My favorite is the radiant floor heating. You go in the basement, you see all like the tubes running through the floor. You see issues with those?
Yeah, so I actually like boiler hydronic heating systems a lot. The nice thing about a hydronic heating system is you can have multiple zones. You have a boiler that heats water or steam and then sends it to different zones in the house. So there will be a thermostat. That thermostat controls the heat in, let's say, just one bedroom or a suite, right? The bedroom and a bathroom. I think the most zones I've ever checked in a house was 18. There was 18 different zones, right? So like almost every room had its own thermostat.
That's cool.
So it's a nice system for the mountains where you're kind of going up a mountainside and you want to make sure that everybody stays comfortable.
The boilers, and I see a lot of them, are super old, and I hear they're just like, they last forever and they're easy to replace the parts on.
Some of the old cast iron ones definitely, I mean, they last forever. And yeah, you just keep replacing parts. They may not be as efficient as some of the newer ones, but they're kind of tanks and they just last for a long time. I guess the thing with those, just to be aware, is they don't have an air filter to change like a furnace does, but they still need some maintenance. So it's a good idea to have a boiler contractor that can come do a flush and a clean and things like that.
How about propane tanks, or yard bombs, as Josh likes to refer to them as?
Propane is a great source of energy, essentially. So if you can't get natural gas to your house, you can choose to have a propane tank installed, and then they generally run a propane line to your house, and you can have gas heating, gas stoves in your kitchen, gas fireplaces. It's just using propane instead of natural gas. Really, the only difference from a user standpoint is you have to get that propane tank refilled.
Talking about like generators and backup power sources because electricity does go out in the mountains.
Not a necessity, I wouldn't say, but it's another one of those backup systems, right? In Denver, let's say, if your power goes out, you probably still have water. With a well system, you turn your faucet on, you'll have some water till your pressure in your pressure tank drops, then you don't have water till the power comes back on. So it's nice to have that generator.
Don't freak out. Every house will have some issues. No home is perfect. That's why people like Josh, he's going to give you a big report of everything that is wrong. Just some things to watch, not a huge issue. Stop freaking out. You're doing it right now. Stop it. All right. Give me some of the worst stuff that you've seen.
Well, let me throw out first the best. I've stood on some people's decks and looked out over mountain ranges, writing up my report, and watched like deer just frolicking. Like it doesn't feel real sometimes.
Yeah,
being able to
Disney
be up
princess.
here.
Like a
Completely.
Disney princess, yeah.
Completely, yeah. But there's just been some weird house I went. So I show up at the house and I get down to the crawl space, which is sort of like a basement, and I open a door. Not even kidding, there's a dungeon back there.
And you have to go in there. This is why
I have to.
Yeah, you have to go in
Because, I mean, their water heater was in there, but somebody had turned it into a dungeon. There were bars, and you open this bar door and you go in. There's literally hatch marks on one of the rocks in there, like somebody had been imprisoned in there or something. You're regretting asking me this now, aren't you?
Yeah. That's what I love about like mountain folks too. There's a lot of different reasons why people move to the mountains, and some like to be by themselves and do weird things in their dungeon basements. Okay, and that's why we inspect. Cool. All right. Good shit. Good stuff. Let's talk about like the things that you don't inspect.
We have limitations. We have standards of practice we follow. So with a fireplace, I'm looking at the things I can access, but I'm not taking the chimney cap off. I'm not disassembling catalytic elements in the fireplace, things like that. Those are things a chimney sweep would do. Same would be true for boilers. You want to have a boiler contractor service older boilers. So even if it's working, still a good idea to have it cleaned and serviced. Generators, try to explain a little bit why you have a generator there, but to actually run it, you'd want somebody that can show you how that works and make sure it's working properly.
You don't like plug things in, correct? Is that a rule that I've heard?
I mean, I'm not testing people's things in their house, but if it's a vacant house and they've got the fridge unplugged, I'll plug that in, check it, and then unplug it at the end. Some of these houses, I mean, you have to do some stuff like that just to get a decent look at the house. But yeah, if something looks not functional or if it looks like it could be damaged by me checking it, then I don't.
I tell people you're kind of like general practitioners in the sense that you're checking like the main functions of the house. If you see an issue, you'll call it out and then recommend, hey, you might want to get a specialist in here to check this out. That's why we typically can leave some extra time, and we like to get the inspections done early. So one, he can send off the water samples to get the potability test. But then also if there is something that Josh finds, we still have time before the inspection objection period to get everybody in here. Josh's inspection is usually like a general home inspection, and then most people add on radon, potability.
I do recommend sewer lines also. A lot of people think because they have a septic system, they don't need one, but you have a sewer line that's underground, us inspectors can't see. It's still a pipe that you need to make sure is in good condition because it could be an expensive fix to excavate and fix that sewer line. So it's still a good idea to have a sewer scope done in between the house and septic tank.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that typically a seller won't know that it is an issue, but it's a health and safety issue, and now if you make them aware of it, they would have to disclose that to any future buyer, and so it's in their best interest to work with you as the buyer on that to get that fixed. And cool. I think you crushed that. Anything else that you think people should know about making their way or moving to the mountains?
Nope, just be ready for an adventure. It's usually good, and I love helping to educate people on that adventure. So
cool.
Thanks, Sean.
Crushed it. All right, so if you're thinking about getting serious about your home search, the first step is to give me a call. Give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. What we do is we'll get you set up on a custom automated home alert, help you discover some of these areas that maybe you haven't thought of yet. There's a whole lot of awesome towns that give you a different level of mountain living. Bailey, Genesee, Evergreen, Conifer, Pine, Deckers, Divide, Idaho Springs, Blackhawk. They all have a little bit different things to offer, and part of our conversation is helping you explore what would be the best fit for you. But you got to call, you got to shoot me a text. Information is below, and we'll get you on your way. Till next time, love you guys. Have a good day.